I think you want to get clear about what you want, like where you are and what you want is important. I know that sounds silly, but like for me, like I knew I didn't have time. So being in the passive investments is something that I needed. The other thing is from an investment standpoint, like I hear a lot about people that are portfolio rich, but they're cash flow poor. So I think balance, like figuring what you want, having that balance, like 'cause you want the equity, but you need the cash flow, got to live, I think is important. And obviously, as we talked about, just the power of community, because you just never know that one person that you meet that could literally like change the whole direction of your future.
This is the Fit Investor Podcast, where we talk about how to live a more holistic life of being fit, not only financially, but physically and faithfully. We'll be joined by experts in all these areas to share their experiences and actionable and practical tips so that you can be a fit investor too. So now let's join our hosts, Cale Delaney, Wesley Whitehead, and Brenna Carls.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Fit Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Cale Delaney, here with my co-host, Mr. Wesley Whitehead, the bearded man, and Brenna, the shark wrestler Carls. And today we have a special guest, Serena Holmes. So Serena she's a realtor up in Toronto, but she's got a whole lot of stuff going on. So she made the decision prior to becoming a realtor, Serena ran her own multi-award-winning brand experience agency called Tigris Events for close to 18 years that she grew to 10 full-time staff at the head office in Pickering and over 2,200 part-time staff across the country, winning multiple awards and recognition of their work since 2014. She then made the decision to merge with another agency in February of 2022 and take the business to a next level, for which she's still involved in an advisory capacity, but this has allowed her to free up her time to focus on working as a realtor and an active real estate investor. So now she's been going through various things. She wrote a book called The Accidental Entrepreneur, which came out in October of 2021, which chronicles how she survived a troubled childhood and became a multifaceted entrepreneur, which is very interesting. Aside from that, Serena resides in Pickering with her husband and daughter, who was born just 3 months before the first COVID lockdown. She's passionate about her family, traveling, health, fitness, wildlife, and sustainability. And she was the VP of events at the Toronto chapter of the American Marketing Association. So, Serena, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast here. And we just want to welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Serena and we had actually connected I had heard her on another podcast. She was talking about private lending, which was something that was very interesting to me. And so I reached out to her and she was gracious enough to get on the phone with me, or actually on a Zoom, and we chatted about it, and we've been keeping in touch and throwing some things back and forth. And so happy to have you here and explore a little bit more of your background. So why don't you start us off? Just tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got started in the real estate world, really, and how it's evolved and developed into what you're doing now.
Yeah, for me, like you mentioned about my book, I bounced around a lot. Like I was actually trying to count the number of times that I moved, and I think it was between 12 and 15 times, and up until I was in university. So I definitely bounced around a lot. So for me, just having my own home was really important. And I never really looked at real estate as anything beyond just buying the place to live so I could have stability and stuff like that. So when I started working with Tigris, my sole focus was just saving up enough money to have my own house. So I wasn't going to be a burden on family and I wouldn't bounce around anymore and stuff like that. But then about 8 years into the business, I'd been winging it up until that. And I hired a business coach. And two of the biggest takeaways from her were just in terms of managing your numbers. So just trying to understand your metrics, like where things are coming from, like how to manage your margins and things like that. But the other big thing was just to invest some of the money that I had at that point in time. She had said most businesses operate on 3 months, and I had like more than a year and a half. And this is a waste sitting in the bank. So I always looked at it from the standpoint that sometimes clients don't pay deposits. It can take a long time to pay. Like I always wanted to be able to accommodate the work coming in. And we were very committed to paying our staff in 2 weeks. So she encouraged me to loosen the reins a bit, and maybe I'd be more comfortable operating on 6 to 8 months, but I could take out the rest and put it towards an investment. So at the time, I didn't feel like what I could qualify for here was super great, just because real estate is fairly expensive in my area. And I also didn't want to deal with like the landlord tenant board because it's very favorable for the tenants. But I do have family in Fort Myers, Florida, that they've been down there for a long time. And for the first time probably in my whole life, the dollar was at par. So I was able to take advantage of that and buy a short-term rental in a golf course community, probably about 20 minutes from where my family lives. And by buying it that way, I was able to use some money from my business, some money from my home equity line of credit, a little bit of savings, and basically buy it for cash. So my focus was I knew that I would make money on it when I sold it because the dollar wasn't going to stay par probably for very long. So I kept it for 4 years, doubled my money during that time. And then I came back and what do I do now? So I started staffing events for this real estate education company in Texas and Florida, even though they're from Guelph, so about an hour west of where I am. And they came to Toronto for their well tour, and I went through their system, which is a 1 hour event, 3 days, and then it leads into the membership. And I just was able to immerse myself more in all the different concepts around real estate investing. I went to their first investor summit and bought 2 pre-construction properties, invested in 3 syndicated mortgages and a land development deal. And then my friend, I got talking to her and she's, you got to talk to my mortgage broker. I do all this private lending. Like I make more money doing that than I do in my business. And 5 years later, I've done 60 deals. So that's really saved me throughout COVID and stuff like that. And now I just try to diversify as much as possible. And I'm trying to explore some joint venture opportunities so I can start building equity on the portfolio side.
Wow. Excellent. And
Yeah.
amongst all that, you
Yeah,
wrote,
well,
well,
I wrote it. So when I went to that first investor summit, there was a woman there that does a lot of ghostwriting and writing retreats. And she actually has written Michael Gerber's E-Myth. She's like the ghostwriter for him and some of the owners of this real estate education company. So when I saw that they were having this writing retreat in San Diego, I was like, I've always wanted to write a book. Like people have always told me, like, your past is so crazy. You've got to write a book one day. So it was always like the seed had been planted. So I went there for the weekend. We holed up in our bedrooms essentially and just wrote for 3, 4 days straight. And I wrote a little more than half the book there, finished it when I came back. And then I hit a wall when it came to publishing. This is going back to 2018. So when the pandemic hit, yes, I had my daughter at home, but my business came to a standstill. So I committed to 2 things. So one was getting my real estate license. And then between each of those courses, I spent time doing editing with a self-publisher that I found here. And then it took about a year just to get that completely done and ready to go.
wow, no, that's very cool. And are there any tidbits from the book that are takeaways that you want to share with the audience? Give them a little
Yeah, it's all about the lessons, right? So I feel like sometimes people have said it's part memoir and part business book, but I really didn't feel like I could write one half without the other half because I think all the challenges I went through growing up paved the path into entrepreneurship and how scrappy I was. Like I didn't have anyone handing anything to me. So I'd go and work 4 different jobs and say yes to everything because I was just trying to make ends meet. But then one thing leads to another and it's just how it happens. And even at the end of the book, I have, I think, my top 10 tips for entrepreneurs. And obviously throughout it, it's just those lessons. And hopefully if those things resonate with someone on the personal side, whether they're going through the loss of a loved one or a divorce or custody issues, or it could be on the other side of their business, like I think there's something in it for different people, depending on what they want to take away with it. And hopefully if they can learn from my challenges or mistakes, maybe it can mitigate the impact that they would have if they choose to do something different.
No, absolutely not. That's really awesome. And just from since writing the book, have you seen any fruits of that labor? I'm sure people contacted you or some new networking opportunities that opened up since then?
Yeah, I mean, I think one challenge, I guess, with the publisher I went with is at the time they didn't really have maybe the greatest marketing options. So I think what would have been helpful is just have a strong PPC campaign to drive people to the Amazon page to buy it and stuff like that. So that's why I started going on podcasts because I wrote this book last year. Like I want to be able to expose more people to it and drive some sales. So by going on these podcasts, I can differentiate myself as a realtor, but an investor focused realtor, and then also plug the book and stuff like that. So I have had people reach out. And I think just because I have written it, it gives me a little bit more teeth when I do apply to be on a podcast or something like that, because I can say it's something that I've done.
Sure, sure. So I know you said growing up, you said you kind of had a scrappy life. You moved around a lot. Did you ever think as you were growing up or even into your early adulthood that you would be an entrepreneur? Was that something that was in your mind?
I didn't. I thought I was going to be a journalist. I went to school for broadcast. So I really thought that I would tell other people's stories. And I really believe in in the value and the power behind that. But what they don't tell you going through it is how hard it is to get a job. And when I came out, I was volunteering. I think I volunteered even for 2 to 3 years after university, thinking it would lead to things. But then the opportunity to run my own business just landed in my lap. My dad had his own business. And I think what I learned from him even is like all the things not to do, like super disorganized. I don't think he's filed his taxes in 30 years. So if I could have my account file on January 2nd, I would do that. Like I'm terrified of the government and taxes and stuff. So I learned a lot from my parents in the sense of what not to do.
Right.
Like my mom and my dad, both in very different ways. But yeah, it was never something I ever thought that I would do. And that's why the name of the book is The Accidental Entrepreneur, because I didn't start the business. It wasn't my idea. I started as a part-time brand ambassador. And then the woman that started it hired me as a manager. And then shortly after said, do you want to come on board as my partner?
Mm.
And we didn't even have a partnership agreement. She just issued me 50% of the shares and off we went. And then 4 years later, she decided to leave the business for personal reasons. So then we went through a buyout.
Okay. Wow. So thinking back when you, I guess, made that transition to now becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
can you think of, were there any challenges or real struggles that you had or any failures or things that for our audience, new entrepreneurs to maybe look out for?
Yeah. Like I said, we didn't have a partnership agreement. So
Right.
don't do that. Like, and even now, like among the real estate investors I'm part of, some of them are business partners and they don't have them. And what I'd said is, first of all, no one goes into business or marriage, like expecting to
Right.
end that one day, but it can happen. So I think it's better and easier to deal with those what ifs when you're in a good space. And then also, what if the unforeseen happens? So what if your business is flourishing and then the other person dies unexpectedly? Like, what does that mean for their family? So having a partnership agreement is almost like having a prenup. Like it deals with a lot of those things and just how to handle it. So I definitely would suggest always do that. And one of the biggest lessons that we had, and things have changed a lot, but we met with someone in 2005. So it was a year after we started in business. They're like, I want to talk to you about SEO. So search engine optimization. And we didn't get it. We were like, we're fine. We didn't even have a website. When we did, it looked like a Word document. Like it was horrible. And I started finally doing it in 2012 because we lost a really big client that was worth about 70% of our business. And I had to start doing SEO to bring in new clients.
Wow.
And I'm like, had I started doing this 8 years prior, before it became even as big as it was, and
Right.
we were very successful in building it, but imagine we did that 8 years sooner. Had I known the value and the power of it and how much it would transform our business, like I would have found some way to pay to get that done. And we probably would have grown exponentially. Like we did well, but we would have grown far more quickly if that had been on our radar. So looking back, that's probably my biggest regret. Like, why did we say that? Like we just didn't get it. And maybe we weren't ready for it, right? But at the same time that I can identify that exact moment and be like, why?
I think that draws a parallel today with what we're seeing going on with AI. This is something that's going to be tremendously huge. I don't know quite in what capacity, but I think it's going to be overarching in so many industries.
Yeah.
But it is frankly, it's a little overwhelming in how quickly it's advancing, all the different applications and things like
Yeah.
that. I just have that in the back of my head that, man, this is something that's going to be big. How do we integrate that now before
Yeah.
things?
And how do you harness it just to be effective with it in the right kind of ways? Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely interesting to see how everything's evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you had the business, you did the buyout, you have the short-term rental. So let's talk about the private lending a little bit. So like I said, that's how I reached out to you. Something I think is really interesting. It's one of those, I think the lending side of the real estate investing world, it doesn't, maybe it's just me, but I don't think it gets as much exposure as the owning the assets and that type of thing. But I think it's probably just as much, if not more so powerful, and has a lot of really great benefits as well. So can you shed some light on that and how you got started with it and what are some of the benefits and why do you like it?
Yeah. Like I said, when I went to that investors summit, I invested in a few syndicated mortgages. And at the time they were structured so that the interest is split half. So it was like, say out of 15%, you got half of it up front and then the balance would be paid at the end. I committed to a 12-month term, an 18-month term, and a 24-month term. So if, for example, you're making $8,000 a year and the term is a year and a half, then at the end, you would also get that lump sum of $12,000 just to break that down. And at the time, my consultant said, you can use your whole home equity line of credit for this. And I was like, obviously, I'm not going to use all of it, but I still used a lot. Like I did half. So I did about 335,000 between 3 deals. And my 2 lessons is I would never touch something with split interest again. And I would never do as much money per deal. So my general common threshold is I'll go with the minimums, like 25 or 50,000 a deal. As I've developed a relationship, I might do a little bit more. But the challenges that I've had on that side of things is that out of the 3 deals I did, 1.5 have been very delayed. 5 years later, I'm still in those contracts. So they should have exited a long time ago and they're looking for even another 2 to 3 years. So they've gone like really long. And because they've gone so long, there's a possibility that back end interest could be compromised. So just to lay that out, that's probably like the deal I've been the least happy with. Like they're still paying their interest, but there's a lot going on and there's just no clear end date. But because of my girlfriend that mentioned the mortgage broker, I thought by working with him, I'll take 100,000 to play with, so to speak. And I did 3 deals with him in the first year. So one was for 45,000, one was for 25, and I think one was for 10. And the terms varied. Like I think they were all principal and interest. So most of them were in the range of 20% interest monthly. So you'd get a portion of, if it was 45,000 over a year, you'd get your principal repayment divided by 12 and then the interest on top of that. And it went really well. So the following year I did 5 or 6 deals with him for another 2 to 3 years past that. And it had been going so well, I was actually able to pay off what I put into those other syndicated mortgages and also a land deal. And I wanted to expand it, but I just didn't want to work with the same person. I think diversity is super important. Even though he's a broker, I still just wanted to diversify. So I reached out to my community and this woman reached out to me directly and said, I've sold all my properties. I'm getting older. I don't want the headache and I just want the cash flow. So she gave me a list of all the different people that she was working with. In some instances, there's like land developers, people that are renovating single family or multifamily properties. And I went crazy. Like I did 26 deals last year. So through her got like a number of referrals, through another investor got referrals to another brokerage. And no one knew COVID was coming. And for me, like I was in an events business. So our events couldn't run anymore. So I was able to accelerate my private lending to live off of during all of that. And I've literally been living off it now for the last 3+ years. And I make really more money than I need to, but it's nice that as a realtor, I don't have the pressure of I need to be making sales to eat and to live. Like ideally what I make as a realtor will actually just go towards what other assets I want to buy. So I've got the flexibility in that sense, but I think it can be powerful just to use the money that you have access to and be strategic with who you're placing it with. And like I said, diversifying as much as possible.
Now, I just want to jump back because you said, so you went to that like summit event and then all of a sudden you invested over 300,000 into a syndicated mortgage.
Three
That,
syndicated mortgages. Yeah. My home equity line of credit, we bought our house in about 12 years ago and we had it reappraised after renovating. And at that time, we opened up 150,000 on the line of credit. I think that was in 2013 or 15 or something. But then our market here went crazy. So I had it reappraised again in 2017. And then my home equity line like quadrupled. So
yeah,
I had access to like about 655,000. So I was
awesome.
able to use half of that I put into the syndicated mortgages. And then I had more beyond that. So when I started with the lending, I will use 100,000. They say never to use more than you're comfortable, like risk losing. But then beyond that, I've diversified a lot. So I'm like, I have access to more than I could use. And even with the interest rate increases, I'm loaning at a much higher interest rate. So even if I'm paying 7.5% on that line of credit, I'm typically loaning out like anywhere from 15 to 25%. So it's always cash flow positive. And I think just by doing smaller amounts with as many people or companies as you can, that's how I try to shelter my risk.
So I want to touch on two things with that. One is just what gave you the comfort level that's a pretty sizable investment off the bat into
Mhm.
an investing strategy to you at least. So what kind of
Sure.
gave you the comfort level to dive in that much?
I think again, just because of the company that I joined, they strongly advocated for that mortgage company at that point in time. A lot of other investors have been burned in the sense of they are still paying. It's just these really excessive delays. Like their contract said they could extend for 6 months twice, and we're sitting here 5 years later. So for me, it was fine. Like it's not the end of the world, but there could be people that's all they did. and then they lost their job in COVID or something. And then they were depending on that money to come back and they're still waiting. So that's the way I've looked at it. Like, I just think the way that they've handled that, like they really mismanaged it. And there's probably hundreds of us all in the same boat. But beyond that's where I learned like lowering the amount of money per deal and then also avoiding the split interest. Because now it's say I hadn't paid that off, I wouldn't even be making anything because 7.5 is what I'm paying on that money now. And that's what the 50% interest payment would be because of the back end. And because it's gone on for so long, they've said there's a possibility like we may or may not see any of that back end interest. So for me, that's about 75 to 80,000 right now. And if they want 2 more years, we're probably looking at, it'll be over 100 by that point in time. So that's like an extra kick in the pants. You locked my money away for a decade. Sorry. So that was my learning lesson through there. The other 58.5 deals I've done have all gone really well. So
That's a good ratio.
yeah.
And then I think the other big thing there is, so you used leverage, right? You used your HELOC. And I think that's something that people need to hear as an option nowadays, especially with interest rates being higher. Yeah, an interest rate on a HELOC is going to be probably 8% plus, more or less at this point.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just writing that off and saying, yeah, why even bother getting a HELOC? I'm not going to use it with that type of interest rate. I'm not going to make those types of returns with an investment. Here's
And
an option to look at. Yeah, exactly.
and it's also tax deductible. So the interest payments, it's like a reverse Smith maneuver in a way, right? So instead of refinancing your mortgage to use the mortgage interest to pay for an investment, like your HELOC interest is also tax, at least in Canada. I don't know about the
Yeah,
States,
it's the
but it's
same.
is a tax deductible write-off, right? So if I was to make 150,000, spend 30,000 in interest, then my income would be 120, right? So I think it's wise. You just have to be like, no one knew that interest rates would go up so high. So there are a couple deals I did in the 12 to 14% range at the beginning of last year. And ideally, like I'm rolling those now into higher amounts, right? Because I think on the active investor side and the people that need the money, they've seen that too. So they're offering more to be competitive so that they can bring in the money that they need for whatever that is.
So and of course, this is going to vary and there's a lot of variables, but what would some standard terms for doing some private lending be? Like what would be like a standard interest rate and standard length of term?
Yeah. They all vary depending on what they need for it, right? So sometimes I've done bridge loans. So that could be someone that needs to close on a property, but they have a line of credit. And the way lenders work, you've got to have no debt when you go into it. So they might spend $2,000 on a $20,000 short-term loan to wipe their personal line of credit, and then they repay you after the mortgage closes. I did another one that was, I think I made 5,500 on 35 for 6 weeks. Another one was 25,000 on 80 for 4 months. And again, some of them are interest only. So on 100,000, you could make anywhere from 14 to 18%. So you're getting your monthly payment upfront. And then at the end of that term, you get the full balance back. So those are really common for people that are renovating properties, whether it's single family or multifamily, because they're doing the work and then forcing appreciation, pulling the money back out on a refinance. And then, like I said, some could even be principal and interest. I don't find that as common with real estate. I would say like business owners or other like private deals I've done that are just, they could need the money for any kind of reason. So
Right.
on one that was like, say 10,000, the interest was $486 a month. And then 10,000 divided by, say, a 6-month term was, I don't know, like 1,500, whatever the amount is. So you're combining that with your monthly payment, but it's nice in that sense because then you're paying back your HELOC as you go and stuff. So they do vary. Like I said, it could be as short as 2 weeks. I'd say a year tends to be the average. I've done some that are 6 months or 3 months, 2 years. They're all over the place. So you just have to see what your comfort level is locking your money away for whatever period of time. One company even does 3 months. And then they give you the option to renew every 3 months. You're not locked in, which is nice. So if you want to exit at that point, you can. So I feel like that's a model that I like just because you never know. I have kept rolling it over, but what if I needed it? It's
Right.
nice to know that I can access it if I want to.
So let me ask you this, because I've seen a few just solicitations out there for real estate investors looking for some private loans, and the terms that I've seen the most common is that they're not wanting to do any payments until the end.
Yeah. So that's like a bridge loan where you wouldn't normally see the payment maybe till the end. I don't like that because I'm paying my line of credit. So I have money that I owe on. So sometimes that could be common, especially if they're renovating. But For the people that are do that, usually they will overfund what they need in order to make those monthly payments.
Mm.
But for me, like I don't prefer no payment just because I am like carrying that debt. Like for me on the money that I've loaned out right now, my payments say $3,700 a month just in interest. So obviously I need to be able to service that from month to month. So it depends. It depends on where your money's coming from. If you have cash in the bank, like my husband had one that he did. It was, I think, 10,000 and he just got the money back and then the interest was added to the payment at the end.
Got it. Very interesting stuff. So just to wrap that up, like if somebody's looking to get started in the private lending world, do you have
Yeah.
any quick tips of where they get started or how they get started?
Yeah, I think the community is a big part of it. So I'm in a few groups now. Like I'm part of a mastermind with, I feel like the low person on the totem pole because I'm on the passive side, but there are people doing like big land development projects, land assemblies, like buying 100 of unit apartment buildings. So they're always raising money because they'll raise money for the deposits, the down payments, like the renovation. So a lot of the deal flow that I've even had is just they're always raising money. And it's people I've gotten to know a lot over the last year. Like we traveled together, we have weekly calls together. So I'm like one of the few passive people. So that's one. There's also a lot of real estate investing groups. So I'm now part of two other groups, the real estate education company. And then I joined another one so that I can be a little bit more targeted in what I'm learning. And the one group has about 3,000 members. The other one has 700. There are some groups on Facebook as well, specifically to real estate investors and private lending. But again, I think it's important that you try to get to know who they are, like do that due diligence. Ideally, if they come referred by other people, it doesn't make it perfect, but there are a lot of things that you're going to want to look at. I find it good practice to get the borrower's identification. I like to look up to make sure they're on title for the property. We want to make sure they have appropriate insurance if they're renovating, not just a homeowner's insurance, but a builder's insurance. You can check their credit. And just to understand the full scope of everything, I think you just always want to have more than less, just so that if anything ever happened, like you fully understand who you're working with and all of that.
No, excellent. Thank you very much for really breaking that down and sharing the successes and the failures or challenges and giving us some real practical tips and everything. So that's really awesome. And I think the overarching thing that I got throughout this and learning about your career and everything is really the networking. It seems like you're big into that. You're in various groups,
Yeah.
going to these various events. And I'd venture to say that you'd probably attribute a large part of your growth and everything to being in these different events and masterminds and coaching and all that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it can be really isolating. I've just been at home with my daughter for the last 3 years. I'm only started to like venture out now in the last 6 months.
Right.
But I feel like just through doing those connections, you just never know. The one thing that someone could say that could change the trajectory of what you're doing. And I think that they often talk about it, expansion and contraction and stuff like that, right? You can do all these things and you take it back and reflect on it and decide what you're going to do next. But you never know where that could lead in terms of the partnership. I've decided, at least for the season I'm at in my life, like I know I'm not going to go and try to suffer through renovating a multifamily property by myself. But there's people doing it and they have systems and they're successful. So I can grow through them. And there are some instances where people can jointly hold like 100 doors, but they just put the money in. They're not doing any of the work. So I think that there is some power in growing your portfolio that way. If you just know that you don't have the time or the skill or something, and maybe I can learn with them as we go. And 5 years from now, maybe I would try it. But for where I'm at right now, I just know that I'm not going to do that on my own. So I've just tried to explore where those partnerships could be successful for what my needs are.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so I want our audience to make sure they heard that and just hearing about these different types of ways to invest as well, because again, the mainstream stuff is buying the big apartment building or the short-term rentals or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we don't hear as much about these other options, which can be very lucrative and maybe even have some better risk benefit awards as well.
And I think sometimes people are intimidated by that. Like you don't see what goes into it. Like you'll hear, oh, I bought 100 doors, I have 1,000 doors. No one's questioning, how did you do that? And the reality is oftentimes it's not like they just have this massive bank account. Like it's usually because they're using private money. And that's, I think, one thing that surprised me the most is like how common that is. Like they're literally using private money for the down payment. So it's been interesting to learn and even walk through pro formas with investors on that side to see how they're pulling this together and making it happen. So you always see the results and the outcomes and you know what they're doing, but you don't know how they're actually doing it. So it's interesting to see how is that achievable for the average investor. And if you don't have the time or the desire to do that, there are other things that you can be doing.
Yeah. Look what fits your needs or your comfort level. So yeah, I think it's awesome. So let's transition. Let's talk about your family life. So you mentioned you have married, you have a 3-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And of course, having children, being married, having various businesses, all this stuff can take a lot of effort and a lot of time from our life.
Yeah.
But we need to be able to focus on these other areas. And so how do you maintain your sanity? What do you do to keep fit? How do you maintain the balance in your life with all this stuff going on?
Yeah. I had a gym at home since we bought this house ultimately. I live in a 5-level back split, so we've got no shortage of space. And so we put a gym in here like many years ago. But what I found is that with my business, I was very inconsistent. Like, we got busy with work. I would probably just work for 2 hours when I woke up and then skip my workout. And I went to a retreat. I was part of this group called the Executive Council, and it was business owners that would meet every month and go through different things, almost like a little business mastermind. And they had a neuroscientist come and speak to us at a retreat that talked about how you lose brain cells every single day. And it could be from different things, trauma, alcohol, like just every day you're losing them as you age. But the one thing you can do to not only minimize that impact, but also replenish them is really from exercise. And it's something to do with the blood flow to the brain and stuff like that. And it just always stuck with me. And I think I went to that retreat at the end of 2017. But what I found when I had my daughter, once she started sleeping through the night about 4 months in, I started really committing to working out like 5 days a week, even 6 days sometimes. And it just gave me so much energy to really get through. Like, when you have a baby and now a toddler, like, they're tiring. So the days that I don't work out, I'm like, I'm dragging my butt. I'm like, I'm so tired today. So it's almost become something I feel like I really need, and it sets the tone for the day. So I've really committed to making sure I'm consistent with that. And there could be times like when I'm traveling or whatever, maybe a couple of weeks a year that I'll miss, but I've really been like more consistent in the last 3 years than I ever have been. So I've got quite a lot in the gym. Like, I've got a spin bike, an elliptical, free weights, to like a cable system, a multi-purpose gym. So it's pretty good for a home gym.
Yeah. I'm just jealous that your daughter started sleeping through the night at 4 months.
Yeah. There's a
My-
book called 12, what is it? 12 hours in 12 weeks. So I was actually a little behind that, but someone introduced me to the concept. And the whole point is that once they're 11 pounds or something like that, you can start weaning them off. So I just started weaning her around that 14 to 15 week mark. And within 2 weeks, she was sleeping through the night.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the best book as a new parent.
I was just 3.5 and he doesn't sleep through the night.
Oh gosh. I'm not saying she just moved to a toddler bed. So sometimes she'll wake up and come in now, but for the most part, she's been pretty good. Very lucky.
Well, I'm going to have to look at that book.
Hey guys, it's Brenna Carl, CEO and co-founder of The Mortgage Shop. When I'm not spending my time searching for the best pizza in town, working out, well, because of pizza, or fighting sharks as Kale likes to say, I spend my time educating clients on the best investment products that will help them build generational wealth and making sure their loan process is as smooth as warm butter on a piece of toast. Call us today to get started with your investment journey at 800-816-7982, or, to talk more about pizza. Talk to you soon.
So kind of, you talked about having the gym and everything, but what's your routine? Like, what do you focus on? Do you do more of the machines or the free weights, or what's your fitness goal?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I think it's good there's value to both. I think I do probably like 25, 30 minutes of cardio, and then I'll do a full weight routine. So I'll do legs 2 days a week. I'll do bis and tris one day, and then I'll do shoulders and back one day. And then, so I'll stick to a 40 routine with that. And then on the other days, like, I might do cardio alone, like a Wednesday and a Saturday or something like that. And then oftentimes I'll take a Sunday off. And I did walk a lot. Like, when my daughter was young, like, I've never walked so much in my life. It's like what you do. And it got to the point where she didn't like that as much. And I noticed the difference. So I think I'm going to try to, with the nice weather being here, commit to doing like a short walk after lunch or something like that, just because, I haven't done it now in a while, but I do think that was really good for me as well.
And do you do your workouts in the morning or?
Yeah, in the morning. If it doesn't happen in the morning, like, it's never going to happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I think it's one of the most common objections that you get is, I don't have the time or this or that.
I started waking up an hour earlier. I used to be like a 10 to 6. Now I'll try to be in bed by 9. I'll get up at 5. She gets up 6:30. So if it doesn't happen, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so just like in anything, whether it's business or whatever, if you want something to happen, you got to make the sacrifices to do it, right? So
And schedule it. Like just once it becomes that habit, right? Like they say, what does it take 2 weeks to form a habit? Like just being consistent. And then it's easy to break it, but I think it's just being mindful of that and being consistent.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, so for me, that was key as well as switching to when our youngest was born, same thing, switching to the morning routine and doing the workouts in the morning. But yeah, exactly. Whether you have the time or not, frankly, come evening time when you could go to the gym, you're probably exhausted. And that's the last thing.
And as a parent, I used to do that when I was younger. And when it changed was like, honestly, when we got dogs, because you're like, you worked all day. When do you see them is at night, and kids are the same. So that kind of added to that. And I think just by having the gym at home as well, like that is big having a daughter, because if I'm up with her in the morning, I can't just leave. And then there's days that my husband works and he's on shift. So if I had to leave, like that wouldn't really be possible with her. So I think just by having it at home, there's no excuse to miss it.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. And then what about diet and nutrition? Do you follow any programs, or just what's your view on eating and food?
Yeah, I think nutrition is obviously very important. I wouldn't say I'm perfect with it. I think I just ate so many salads now. I'm like, do I really want to eat a salad? I know it's good for you, but like you can only choke down so many. So I try to just mix that up. But I do just try to be mindful of balancing things. So there's always greens, like always have spinach in my protein shakes. I'll have spinach and eggs. And for lunch, I'll do like yogurt, and I'll even put protein in that. I'm sure I could probably still be better. Like sometimes I won't have an afternoon snack, and that's not necessarily good, but we eat really early. Even we're done dinner by 5 o'clock, and I never snack at night. So I try to be mindful of just what we're having. So I think we do pretty well, like 80% of the time, but it's not like we're going to just never have an ice cream cone or not have a hot dog on the weekend or something like that. So
You're still going to enjoy life, right?
yeah,
Know something about that, Kale.
yeah. Yeah. So I think I try to be pretty good, especially getting older and stuff like that. Like I even like to have a glass of wine with dinner, but I pretty much don't even do that during the week anymore. So I just try to be mindful of all that. Like even just my water intake, I'm trying to be like diligent with that also. But you got to think about it, because I was probably like just chronically dehydrated through my 20s and 30s. I like just forget to even drink it.
Weren't we all?
Yeah, no, it's Wes jokes there, but it's true. We're talking about this, I think, on the last guest that we had here, and everybody has a different opinion or view on food and everything. I like food, don't get me wrong, but
Lay down.
Now he likes dry chicken and rice.
Yeah.
Kale likes protein powder. That's what he likes.
Yeah.
that's true. That is
Yeah.
true. But no, I view food and eating more so as from the utility function of it than from the enjoyment function of it. So
Yeah.
I don't, like I said, I'll enjoy a delicious meal or something like that, but it's not something that I like crave. So I'm fine with whatever relatively bland type things or similar type things. But some people are not. Some people need that variety and whatever. It's whatever kind of suits your taste. There's ways to still eat healthily no matter what way you look at it, frankly.
Yeah.
Brenna, you're more into the enjoyment of the food, but still making it healthy as well.
Yeah.
So,
If it hadn't taste good, I can't. I'd be big as a house. There's no way.
Yeah.
The way I can do dried chicken, I've done it before and it's just awful.
she was sharing some pictures of her homemade pizza with, what was it, making the crust out of yogurt and
Greek yogurt and egg whites.
Nice. Interesting.
Yeah. See, that doesn't sound too appealing to me, but
You tried it. I don't know, because you're oblivious to good tasting food. But
I didn't say I'm
Wes, if you tried it, it'd be really good.
I think what happens over time, Kale has lost his taste buds through like adaptation and mutation.
Yeah.
You
I know,
can
I've even said that. I was like, if we didn't have taste buds, it would be so easy, right? You would just eat well all the time. But
yeah, Kale just needs an IV drip of protein, and he's
That's how my husband is. I'm like, no, thank you.
Hey, makes it easier.
yeah.
no. I, honestly, I joke with you, Kale, but I do admire your discipline when it comes. I do admire that. I wish I had
I
that.
admire it.
I personally don't like eating processed foods because I don't feel good when I eat them. But I also don't mind eating a little bit of sugar. I don't mind fats. I don't mind breads,
Yeah.
things like that. I don't particularly like protein drinks.
Yeah.
I'll say protein drinks, just a hint for everybody, y'all and everybody that's listening. I found the best protein drink that pretty good for you still, and it's not going to taste like chalk. So I've tried just mixing water with regular protein powder, which is fine. But
Fairlife protein. It's chocolate. I get it on Amazon because you can't find it anywhere but Amazon, but they have 30 grams of protein in it. And I believe it's only 100. Look at my fitness pal. Give me a second. It's only 130 calories, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. And it tastes just like chocolate milk. Fairlife is a healthier brand that comes out with like milk and lactose free milk and stuff like that. So y'all should definitely check it out. Wes, I know you don't like the processed stuff, so you may have to look at the ingredients to see if you want to drink it, but it's
Well, like-
really just
well, for
like,
me,
Wes eats pork belly for breakfast, so he's
No,
he'll be-
seriously, okay. I've noticed this. Like, if I'm gonna on my training days, if I have a couple slices of brisket before I go train, man, like it's a whole nother level.
who eats a couple slices of brisket?
he walks in, he's
No, like,
and everybody.
I always have something smoked in the fridge that I just did. I'll load a couple slices. I'll put it in the toaster to get it nice and warm. Eat it with a glass of milk, and I'll go. And man, like I can't even describe it.
What smoker do you
It all
have?
depends on what I think your priorities are for, right? Like used to work actually at a gym when I was in like the end of high school until like my early 20s and stuff. So obviously there's a lot of people competing and things like that. But I think really what I've learned is just, again, going back to my family and the mistakes that they've made, like they're horrible eaters, like really horrible. Like I think my mom just lives on carbs. But I think there's honestly all these health issues that have come out from that, right? Like across the board on that side of the family. And they're so quick to just want like a Band-Aid solution and get a pill from the doctor, whether that's for cholesterol or for antidepressants and different things. And I'm like, if they changed their diet and mixed in a little more like exercise, I bet they could reduce the health issues that they're experiencing. And I do think all of that is connected in a way that is so much stronger and more prevalent than the average person would pay attention to. So yes, there's the people that want to stand on stage and compete, but I think it's just also about being very careful and conscientious so that if you can minimize those kinds of health issues, then hopefully you can.
Yeah, exactly. All joking aside, you don't have to have a super strict diet to be healthy, right? There's no issues with having things in moderation, having the cheat days or whatever, the brisket or whatever it is. There's no issues with that. And I think it goes with phases of life too. I'm not nearly as strict with my diet as I was when I was younger, and I was, really pushing it a lot harder in the gym and that type of stuff. You just got to find what's going to ultimately be sustainable for you.
Yeah.
And that's what we've preached a lot is find, again, whether it's the business, the fitness, anything,
Yeah.
find what's sustainable, because these crash diets and that type of thing,
Yeah.
they don't, maybe they have a short-term effect, but the vast majority of people, after it's done, they go right back to what they were doing before.
Cringe when I see I haven't eaten any carbs for 6 weeks. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
One, no, I would die. Two, it's just your body, unless you have some kind of medical issue that your body responds better to fats, like your thyroid issue or something, your body needs carbs. And I won't get on my high horse on that.
Yeah.
But Kale, I do think that you should use your name to your advantage though, and come out with the kale diet.
Kale diet. Yeah. Like
Kale, the CALEKALE.
the kale.
There you go.
Published author.
Yeah.
The new
Yeah.
marketing.
I think it really comes down to mindfulness, right? Whether you're looking at things from a business standpoint, your diet, your lifestyle and stuff like that, right? And just look at like, how do you want to feel and how do you want to live your life? And what do you want to see 5 years from now? Because obviously everything you do right now is going to affect all those tomorrows, right? So it's connected to everything.
Discipline. Discipline and everything.
100%. So just besides the gym and everything, like what about like outdoor stuff? Are you into other types of activities or?
Yeah. Having a 3-year-old can be tough to do those things. I do like to golf up at the cottage. They have a women's dine and dine. So oftentimes like I'll go up and golf with our neighbors. That's probably the most I'll get out there. And then we got a trampoline for our daughter as well. So what I thought it was like, oh, she's going to keep herself occupied. But the reality is, no, come and jump with me, mommy. Pretending I'm like the horse from the movie Brave. So she's riding me. She's like, go faster, Angus. And I'm like, I'm so tired. I'm getting a lot of extra exercise just with the trampoline.
I'm wheezing.
Yeah. I'm like, well, like we were there for 2 hours. So I think just through her, I'm definitely getting my fair share of other outdoor activities and stuff like that. And we do have a cottage, so we do get to spend lots of time outside in the summer and even in the winter, like snowmobiling and
Nice.
My husband ice fishes and I'll don't like to be cold, so I let him do his thing. I think we do have a pretty balanced life in that way as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's excellent.
Yeah.
So let's just transition into our last segment here, which is talking about faith fitness. So if you can just share a little bit of your background when it comes to faith. I think you had mentioned you do have a Catholic background. Is that right?
Yeah, so for some reason, like my parents baptized my brother and they never baptized me. So when I went to go live with an aunt and uncle, heading into grade 8, it was a challenging time because I was leaving a situation with my dad and my stepmom. And we went through this big custody battle and stuff like that. But my uncle was really devout Catholic. And my cousin at the time that I moved in with was going to Catholic school. So since they supported that system, I moved over from the public side to the Catholic side. And religion entered my life at a time when I was struggling with different things. It's like perfect timing. And I ended up going through the process of getting baptized when I was 13. So I wasn't a baby. So I made that conscious decision and got really heavily involved in my community and my church and stuff like that. I always went to my youth group. And I guess where it changed for me is that I was writing like an essay or a project towards the end of high school on women in the priesthood. And I've always believed in equality and rights for females and stuff. And the priest that I met with was just basically saying female priests would never be accepted in the Catholic Church because they don't embody Christ and things like that. It just really rubbed me the wrong way. So things changed for me from the institutional side, where I do believe in like being good, love thy neighbor, like giving back and all of that. But I decided to have my twist on it. I believe that you'd find God more in nature than you would like within the confines of a church. So I think everyone can find their meaning in different ways. So that just put that twist on it. My husband and I did decide still to baptize our daughter Catholic and still put her in that system, since I have had the experience went through both. And I liked a lot of the things that the Catholic system still had to offer when it came to community and giving back and being a good person. That it doesn't mean that you don't ever talk about those things in the public system, but it's obviously far more like out there and prevalent on the Catholic side. That's our whole take. The one thing that they said was that we got married outside in Thailand and they wanted us actually get married again in the church. They felt like we didn't hit that sacrament properly. For us, like we did what was important to us and our twist on it. So everyone has their own way of looking at things. But for me, that was part of my journey.
One thing something I've actually just been thinking about a little bit, and I know, of course, the Catholic faith has a different opinion on things, but even within the Christian faith, there's different opinions on baptism and things like that. And Wes, I'd be interested in your input as well. But what do you think about infant or child baptisms versus being baptized when you're of, I think, I don't know what the right term maybe, but a responsible age to understand what you're doing?
So are you asking me or are you asking Serena?
Both.
Time
Oh,
out.
yeah,
When
I
you
think
say
it's something
baptism,
different.
child baptism, do you mean like the christening, or is there certain religions that actually, like I don't really know much about that. So
I understand what you're saying though. Like I have friends that made that same decision, that they're like, I don't want to have to decide. I don't want to decide for my child. Like when they're an adult or if they're a teenager and they want to do that, then they can choose what religion. Again, because we did want to go into the Catholic system, it doesn't mean they have to be baptized, but there's obviously going to be things that they go through, like First Communion, confession, just all the different things that they go through. So I think for us, my husband and I made that decision, but I can see why sometimes maybe people might decide that they don't want to be the person responsible for that.
are you talking about christening though, or actual baptism? That's what
Baby.
I'm.
I think that's the same thing. Is that
Okay.
right?
As a baby though, so if if you're like christened when you're a baby, that means you don't have to get baptized as you get older.
We can
Well-
always change. Obviously, some people have moved into become Jewish or Buddhist or like different things that they've gone
Right.
through. It doesn't mean that you're like locked in that forever, but
So if we're going to go off of just straight up scripture, the order is believe and be baptized, right? So
Right.
that requires cognition, understand. And what baptism is supposed to be biblically is identification with the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, right? Now, the Catholic Church has you baptized first, then believe. The church that I go to, which is a Presbyterian church, they also do the same thing the Catholics do, which is pretty funny because they're Protestants, but they didn't protest this part of that religion. They argue that baptism is that baptism today, or meaning post Christ, it mirrors or continues circumcision in the old covenant with Abraham. My beef with that is, and I love my church, but I'm like, okay, circumcision was for males only. Baptism is for males and females. So I don't see the connection there, but either way. But yeah, baptism is supposed to be something that you do understanding what you're doing. If you go biblically, and if you go off a church tradition or whatever, then it's.
See, that's the reason why I got confused, because I've always thought with the christening of a baby, that's showing that the parents are Christian and that they are committing to raising the baby in a Christian home.
It's kind of like the Baptists. The Baptists believe you get baptized once you understand what's happening, but they'll do with baby dedication.
Yeah.
Okay. We are presenting our child to the church saying, hey, we are committed to raising our child in a Christian household. We're asking the church to assist us in this and partner with us. But again, that's not biblical. Not to say it's wrong. Point to a scripture. So the Baptists or people who do the baby dedication, they're finding that middle ground between the Catholic and Presbyterian view of infant baptism with the Baptist view of believers' baptism. So
No, there's again. Sorry for going off on the tangent there, but
there's a lot of things now that I think, aside from religion, that some parents have even been like, I'm not going to assign the gender to my child. So we're in this different era of a lot of things happening, religion being one, identity being another. I guess it all connects to identity. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I think just right now, there's obviously a lot happening where parents, you want to guide them, but they don't want to make those choices. I don't know. Like things have just taken this whole big path in the last couple of years here. I don't know if it's the same for you guys down there, but it's
a lot. A lot.
No, it's the same thing down here. And I would say that to believe that everything modern is superior, incredibly arrogant. And so everyone thinks that this is a new idea, this must be better. New does not always mean it's better. Sometimes things that are new are terrible.
And it can also be said that we've lost the balance. Like it's gone too far from one direction to the other, where it's like everything was very rigid and then it's gone down the path. And I think that from a child perspective can be really confusing. And instead of looking at something where you're tolerant and acceptant, now we're maybe encouraging something that isn't natural and maybe shouldn't. It's one thing to be like, okay, if you've chosen that, you accept it. But it's the other thing now I feel like things are being really promoted and encouraged. Mm-hmm. So again, I think like the pendulum swung so far the other way. And I think somewhere, sometime we got to find a balance, right? Because I think things have swung a little too far.
Yeah, there's always a tendency to overreact and miss entirely the middle. But we've got a point today where you would be expected, if your daughter was anorexic, you would be expected to affirm her anorexia and say, oh, yes, absolutely. You know,
what?
Yeah.
No, that's my point. This is where we're going. We're
going to say your child can do anything and choose it. Like, no, as a parent, I think you give guidance and support and a foundation and ethics and morals. There's a lot wrapped up in that. So I think
here's nothing, and you can go off of it like as fitness too. You have a 9-year-old. You're not going to put that 9-year-old in bodybuilding, like steroids to bodybuilding, lift heavier than his.
Feels like what?
Feels like why not?
Even feels like kid is like bench pressing like 90 pounds or anything. Anywho, don't take offense to this, Gail. But
yeah,
scientifically, your body has to grow
to a certain point.
Scientifically, you are not mentally mature. Your brain continues to develop until you're 26, 25, 26. And even today, like I look back at my age at 25, 26, and I'm like, dang, I'm done. And like, I feel like you're continuously growing. And so to me, that's a hit. Like, we won't get into it. I won't go on old enough high horses. But to me, it's a health issue to do all of that when you're a child.
You don't have the decision-making capacity, and you probably don't understand the long-term consequences. And at the end of the day, you change your mind. Like my daughter can be like, I love this today. The next day I hate it. So when you think of these bigger life-changing decisions, like they're not.
So glad it wasn't like this when I was young, because y'all, I had a bowl cut until I was in 7th grade. I looked like a little boy, and I did all the stuff. I played in the mud. I did all that stuff. So if y'all see me when I was young, like I looked homely.
You'd be called Bruce.
No, it would be Brennan.
I think you should bring
Brandon. Yeah, there you go.
Bring back the bowl cut, Brenna. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that. I had a really bad perm, big, big glasses
My
for
sister
like most
called
of
me
my high
Richard
school
Simmons.
years. So I hear you.
My mom cut my hair in bowl cut and then she permed it. And then my sister called me Richard Simmons. So let's just, we'll leave it at that.
Okay. I'll bring with that. Okay. Bring it back for a little bit. Anyway, the reason that it spiraled downhill there, but the baptism thing, I just want to bring it back to that just because the thing that I guess gets to me a little bit is I think in the church nowadays, there's a push for numbers, right? And so you get we had X number of baptisms this past month, and it becomes a KPI, like a key performance indicator for the church.
Yeah.
And so I feel a lot of them are pushing, especially on children, to get baptized at very young ages, which, okay, I get it on one sense, but for the children who are 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, or even a bit older, they really don't understand it. They're probably going along with it because maybe a friend is doing it, or it's like what's the cool thing to do if you're at church, right? And you're in the church groups, instead of really understanding the importance. And so I think that's just one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And for me, like when I came to faith, I was in my early 20s, and I waited a period of, I think it was probably a couple of years even or so before I decided to get baptized, because to me, it was a very important thing. And I wanted it to be not just lip service, or more or less to Jesus, but I wanted it to feel true and have that personal relationship when I did it, instead of just doing it because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. You're basically robbing that child of that experience. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not knocking my church. I love my church. They're faithful to the word, but because of their views on baptism, I actually asked, I'm like, you know what? I actually would like to be baptized. Now I've been a believer for probably 15, 20 years, but I was baptized as a kid, kind of like you, Kale. I was going to a church and it was like, that was the thing to do. All my friends were doing it. So I did it as a kid, but I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't a believer back then. And so I asked my church, like, I had to get baptized. And they're like, have you been baptized in the past? And I said, yeah, when I was like 8. And they're like, no, then that's it. It's a one-time thing. And I felt kind of robbed of that.
Wow.
And unfortunately, my children, I have 5 kids. Because I've been attending a church like this since they were infants, all of them have been baptized in the church at infancy. And now I feel like, man, like if they continue in this church, they will be told the same thing that I'm told, which they're not trying to be mean. They're just saying, look, you don't need to. Their whole point
It
is
obviously can't be all churches, because some people convert from Christianity to becoming Jewish. Like when they get married, you have to. So obviously it has to be accepted in some churches.
Well, what I'm saying is like,
religion.
Obviously if I went to a Baptist church today and told them the situation, they'd baptize me, no problem. So I'm not saying I couldn't. I'm just saying is that
This is church specific.
yeah, I'm just saying like,
it's the politics and sometimes the interpretations of those churches that can be challenging. So that's like for me where I ran into those issues years ago, and I was like, this is one priest, and that doesn't mean that will be like that forever, but just that one little conversation is what kind of took me off that path with them.
yeah. And I would say the important thing is you have to, if you're going to claim to be a Christian, right? You have to read the Bible yourself. If you don't read the Bible yourself, you don't know what it says, and all you know is what your pastor says, then yeah, that's gonna be a problem. And part of my problem is I do read the Bible for myself. And so I find arguments on the other side, and I brought that up to them, and they have the arguments on their side, which is good. And we agreed to disagree. I respect them. So I still going to attend the church. I'm not going to say, well, here's this one issue, I'm out. But I honestly have thought about, Kale, for example, going somewhere else to get baptized. I've thought about that. And it's more of to follow the conviction that I have from the Spirit. Is it something that I need to do or I don't need to do? I don't believe that I'm sinning currently by not being baptized. But if I get the conviction where, no, you need to go ahead and follow through with this, then I'll have to obey that. I guess is my point. But like I said, I'm not knocking my church. I respect them. You're never going to find a church, and this guys, where you agree with everything that they teach. It's just impossible. And biblically, even the precedent in Scripture is that God doesn't reveal all truth to one human being. because then that person will become a de facto leader and can lead people astray. That's why the Bible says we need each other. So you, Kale, may have a better interpretation of a certain passage that I may be like, I'm confused about that, and vice versa. And so together in community, we can edify one another and grow. And I feel like what happens in church is, and maybe you guys have experienced this, all four of you, is the church ends up filtering out anybody who disagrees with them on a certain particular issue. And so all you have is basically groupthink.
Right.
And there is no learning from one another because anybody who doesn't agree with the orthodoxy is pushed out. And I understand the desire to protect orthodox, especially today, where if you think you're a butterfly, right? So obviously there's the extreme, but you also don't want to exclude genuine believers who are genuinely converted and genuinely reading scripture and trying to grow in their faith. You want to exclude them or make them feel they're excluded just because they view baptism differently or the spirit or gifts or whatever it is differently. And that's the problem that we have, but nothing's perfect.
Yeah. And that's where, again, just tying everything together, the importance of community, the importance of finding these different avenues, different mindsets, different everything. Just like
accountability.
Right. Accountability. But again, just like in everything that we've talked about in fitness and finance, the same thing. You got to be open to these different avenues. You got to have the network. You got to have that community because that's going to help build you up. That's going to help fill in the gaps for you and you for other people.
And Serena, to build out here real quick, something you said that kind of got to me is that a lot of your success comes from your community as far as your networking and people you've learned from. And I think that applies to all three areas, whether it be fitness, people around you who have similar lifestyle choices.
Yeah.
Like, you know what, I want to do this activity or ice fishing or hiking or snowmobiling, all those things, even in faith. I think the community is something that they tend to neglect in certain areas. And I think wherever you neglect community is where you're going to struggle. So if you neglect community in fitness and it's just you and you alone, it's hard to stay motivated. You might go through a period of, I'm in a funk. I don't want to work out anymore. I'm done with this. And you backslide. Whereas if you're part of
it depends on each person. Like for me, I don't feel like I need other people, obviously, to work out. And that's actually the time I dedicate that hour just to me. I like the quiet. I think about things. I save ideas in my notepad while I'm doing cardio. I don't want anyone there to be a distraction. So I think it depends. But I think one thing I found is that when I joined this mastermind, for example, I literally set up so many calls with people to get to know them one-on-one and see how we could help each other. And then I took a pause, like we had our first couple of events, picked that back up. And I've had one-on-one calls with probably most of them. I think there's 65 of us in total. But then this past weekend, we had our last event. I won like the ultimate contributor award because for every call I had, I'm like, how can I help you? And I would share like resources from my business and introduce them to someone or whatever that was. And it meant a lot to have that impact on people. And I just looked at it like, how can I help you? I can't say I've got this huge portfolio or I'm doing as much as you, but maybe I can give you a playbook for my business or introduce you to someone, or I sent along a lot of the social media training that I had so that they can infuse that into their business. So you just never know how you can help each other. And it might not be today, it could be a year from now or 2 years from now. But if you didn't at least open yourself up to that, then it wouldn't be available.
No, I agree. And just to clarify, when I'm community for fitness, I don't necessarily mean someone's working out with you. Like I look at Kale, for example. We don't live anywhere near each other. We're like 3 hours apart. Like Kale's fitness journey, his goals, things he's accomplished, that inspires me.
Yeah.
Like, even like cutting down sugar, right? That was you. Like I was like, it was so annoying when you were at my house. And I was like, this guy is so freaking annoying with his sugar thing.
He's like, that's got sugar in it. Oh, that's got sugar in it.
Think like natural honey and all this weird alien stuff. But I saw you and I saw your performance and all that stuff. And then I started trying to myself and I feel better. Like I've cut out a lot of sugar, not all, but a lot of sugar. And so I think that community is what I meant. Like people around you who you know, who have similar goals, who are like, hey, you know what? This is what I do. And cool, I'll try that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to add to the sugar, like one thing I learned, I was eating once like apples and peanut butter. And I had a guy working with me. He said, what are you doing? Like he would never put those things together. And he basically told me he'd had like a brain tumor and he spent all this time with scientists in the States because he was trying to learn like how he ended up with this and how to avoid it. And he was talking about the chemicals from eating different food combinations. But at its core, like it was that sugar is one of the things that cancer feeds on, right? So he's talking all about the acidic states and alkaline states. So aside from just how your body looks and feels and operates, there's a bigger thing that cancer is obviously probably the number one killer that Like I can speak for myself. I know probably 15 to 20 people that have all died from it or had it. So when you think about that, it really gives you a different perspective to be like, should I eat this chocolate bar? And I'm not going to say that it originates for everyone that way, but again, the things you put in your body in the long term can lead to these things. So if you can make those conscious decisions and just try to be smart about it, everything's connected and has that ripple effect.
I think, Serena, what you said, you're like, it's just something, you're like, I don't need somebody else to, because I'm doing gym, working out is something I do for myself. And I think the general consensus of that is one, try to do something for yourself that's not eating your feelings. If you are stressed, go on a walk. And I heard it was a great quote I saw. It said, you're not always going to be motivated. You're going to be motivated at first, whether it be investing in real estate, whether it be working out. I see numbers all day. And sometimes, honestly, I wake up and I'm like, if I have to look at another tax return, I'm going to explode. But the thing is, you have to be disciplined. You're not always going to be motivated. You have to be disciplined no matter what you want. So if you want, like Serena, like you said, in 5 years, what you want your life to look like, it doesn't matter if you loathe looking at another contract for private money lending.
Yeah.
That's your passion, that where you need to get to. And so you're disciplined enough to sit down and get it done.
Yeah.
Right.
There's one speaker at our mastermind this weekend. He was talking about changing your energy and your energy shift. He's had a lot of Tony Robbins training. Oops. Lost friend. But he basically had it start where he had music and we're literally jumping all around. And the whole point is just to change your state. Right. And then at the midpoint, he just showed us all these different priming exercises and just how to start your day to get your energy flowing and get you into that certain mindset, because you could wake up feeling tired or you had a bad call to client or something happens. So as long as I think you're aware that you can change your state very quickly in the matter of 3 to 4 minutes, and you can look up Tony Robbins and those exercises to prime yourself is like literally what it's called. And it's to shift your energy to a more positive, like uplifting state. So you can tackle those things that can take different forms. But I was like, yeah, it was an interesting exercise and something like just to be mindful of if you hit that wall, right? Okay, I just got to do an energy shift here.
No, that's very good. Yeah, being conscious, and yeah, there's various ways to do that. Like you said, just some type of movement alone can do it, or certain triggers that you have, or breathing exercises, meditation, prayer. All these things can be critical in terms of changing that mindset. No, it's awesome. It's a great thing to leave it with. Just to wrap it up, then we'll jump into just a few last questions here. And you already gave us some excellent tips when it came to the private lending and everything, but can you give our audience just 3 practical or actionable tips in any of the areas that we've talked about?
3 tips. Yeah, I think you want to get clear about what you want, like where you are and what you want is important. I know that sounds silly, but like for me, like I knew I didn't have time. So being in the passive investments is something that I needed. The other thing is from an investment standpoint, like I hear a lot about people that are portfolio rich, but they're cash flow poor. So even this weekend, I talked to a couple of investors and are like, maybe I'll sell one property and put it into lending because I need the cash flow. They're struggling every month, even though they have these big portfolios. So I think balance, like figuring what you want, having that balance, like, cause you want the equity, but you need the cash flow, gotta live, I think is important. And obviously, as we talked about, just the power of community, because you just never know that one person that you meet that could literally like change the whole direction of your future. And I can specifically pinpoint like those few people along the way that just that one conversation totally changed things, right? So I think by having those focused meetings, like you just never know what could come out of it. So don't be afraid to ask. Like people will be far more generous with their time than you probably could realize. So I think finding that community where you've got those resources is really powerful.
Excellent. Beautiful. Brenna?
What and where is your favorite pizza? What type of pizza, and then like where is it at?
What my favorite kind of pizza?
Yeah, and where from?
Like, did I hear that right? So the funny thing, there was a pizza place we went to in Woodbridge, which is like 45 minutes northwest of where I am. We liked it so much, we started making it at home like 10 years ago. So it's a big thing, like to do this pizza night. So basically, it's a white pizza. So we make the dough ourselves and we'll put our Asiago on it with oil, garlic infused oil. And then when it comes out, the way that we initially had it had arugula in a lemon olive oil dressing with prosciutto. I actually stopped eating red meat 6 years ago. So now we do portobello mushrooms. So sometimes my husband still has a prosciutto, but all of the portobello mushrooms. But it literally, like my mouth will be watering, like the house smells like so garlicky and a big thing. We have the homemade Caesar salad and the pizza. And usually we'll do that every 2-3 months or something like that. But
Do you cook it in a regular oven or?
We do it right now in a regular oven, but we've been exploring, like, do we need a pizza oven? But then we'd probably.
They were, how do you like not get cold chills when people say talk like that? Like, how do you not get cold chills from her? Maybe I'm just the person that gets cold chills from people talking about pizza, but that sounds
Oh, it's
amazing.
good. I feel like it damaged me because any other pizza, I'm like, this is gross. I don't want to eat it anywhere else. Like, we make the best one. So,
Do they give you the recipe to make it at home, or you just like research some things?
no, we saw what it was that we had there. And again, it's a far drive for us. We're not going to drive for it all the time. So we're like, how can we make this at home? And it just came down to what the ingredients were.
Yeah.
Brenna, you've got a kindred spirit and pizza.
Yeah. It's
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Serena. I really appreciate this. Really great information. Why don't you just tell our audience, where can they find you? Where can they get in contact or learn more about you?
And your book again.
Yes.
Well, I have a few profiles just because they're all dedicated to different audiences. When it comes to real estate, everything related to the home or real estate investing, I have Serena Holmes, Realtor. For my book, I have Serena Holmes, author. So that's everything around the book and my story, but then also things around like inspiration, motivation, entrepreneurship, business, like the different podcasts that I've been on. And then more recently, I just launched a podcast called Inspired to Invest. And so that's Inspired to Invest podcast. It just launches tomorrow with my first episode with a guest.
Awesome.
And it was really just based on trying to bridge the gap for people. A lot of times people see investors as really elusive and affluent, but I want to show them like, no, like most of them started like working a job or grinding it out or doing these in the military, whatever it is. And they all had one person that was that catalyst to shift them along. So just to show them and to empower them to really take charge of their financial futures and see like what options are available. So I just started recording that in the last little bit and it officially launches tomorrow.
nice.
Excellent. Very good. There you have it, Miss Serena Holmes.
Thank
And
you.
check out her book, check out her podcast. And again, thank you very much for your time, Serena.
Thank you.
Take care.